Okay. Yes, definitely helps if we press record. Nathan Willard here, writer director of Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse. And this is the first in a series of videos that I'm going to be doing that I think could be interesting to two different types of people. One are people who have seen the movie, they like the movie, and they want to know more about it. So I'm just going to be commenting on different things in the process of making the movie and commenting about the movie behind the scenes kind of things. The second are people who they may not have seen the movie, or they may have seen the movie and they don't particularly like it. However, they're interested in filmmaking and low budget filmmaking, and specifically micro budget filmmaking. And I am going to talk about the process of making this movie, in the mistakes I made, the things I would do differently, and also things that I think went pretty well. And I'm going to talk about those things and talk about the things I would recommend doing. So, to start with, I'm going to go way back, although I'm not going to give you my full life story. I'm going to talk about how did I get to this point where I made this movie. Um, when I was a little kid, the thing I wanted to do was be an actor, and that's because I loved film, I loved TV, and the only thing I knew about was the actors. I didn't know about any of the process of making the film. So I thought, well, I want to be involved in film. I want to be an actor. Now, as I grew up, I learned there's a whole lot of other things involved. And when I was 18, I wrote my first screenplay, which was actually a Dukes of Hazzard screenplay. And life happens. I did a whole lot of other different things throughout the time. Didn't really get into filmmaking for a variety of reasons, but finally, about 8 years ago, I decided, okay, now I really need. I This is my passion. This is what I want to do. I need to do something, and so I decided I'm going to start with screenplays. That's where I'm going to start again, because ultimately I wanted to be a writer director. So I'm going to start with the screenplays, start try to write some screenplays, maybe sell some screenplays, whatever, or be involved in the process of writing some screenplays, and then I can move towards the directing slowly. So I took a course from Screenwriting University, which was a 1 month course where we studied the mini movie method, which was developed by Chris Soth, and we wrote a screenplay in a month using the mini movie method. Now, that eventually became the screenplay that is Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse. Now, I wasn't planning to make a movie at that time with the screenplay, it was just an exercise. But I became friends with a guy in the area who named Mike Irwin. He was a producer for many, many years, 30 years, and started just talking to him about the industry and whatever what I was trying to do and just trying to learn from him. And now he recommended that I read the book um, by Robert Rodriguez, A Rebel Without a Crew. Now, if you're not familiar with Rebel Without a Crew, it's about Robert Rodriguez making his first micro budget film, El Mariachi, which he made reportedly for $7,000. Now, I remember when El Mariachi came out. I saw it when I was in high school, and I remember watching stories about how it was made and all that stuff, and it was really cool. And but I had forgotten about it, and so I wasn't even thinking about micro budget movie making, any of that kind of stuff at the time. But reading that book and getting back into that story and learning more about that process, it inspired me, and it made me realize, well, hold on a second. I don't have to wait. I can make a movie right now. Even more so with all of the advancements in technology, with digital cameras, with digital recording, audio recording, it's so much simpler and easier to make a movie now than it was when Rodriguez made El Mariachi, that I thought, okay, I can do this. And I had a lot of connections in Southern Oregon, that I thought, okay, with these people's help, we can do this together. And that's part of the key about making these kinds of things. It's important to have other people around you who can help you do it. I mean, some people do make some pretty incredible stuff all by themselves, but most of the time you're going to have some other people involved helping you make it happen. Now, I also read a book by Ed Burns, which was about his experience making micro budget movies. It's another book I highly recommend. I can't remember the title off my head, but I'll put it on the screen here. And if you don't know who Ed Burns is, he had a similar experience to Robert Rodriguez. Made his first movie for like $25,000. It also got into Sundance and launched his career. But he later in his life, when his career was sort of stalled out, he came back to micro budget movie making with digital cameras and this and more of what it is today. And so he talks about that as well. So it's a interesting, not just the old 90s process of micro budget movie making, but also more of a modern process of micro budget movie making. And that's what Ed Burns talks about. So I highly recommend that book. And third director, Werner Herzog. With him, I watched a masterclass from Werner Herzog, and again, if you know anything about Werner Herzog, he has made some very low budget movies through his career, and he's done some pretty crazy stuff. So he's not necessarily the guy you want to copy because some of the things he's done are very dangerous and irresponsible. But some of the things he does, you do want to copy. And more than anything, you can learn from the spirit of Werner Herzog, the attitude of Werner Herzog. And one of the things he talked about in the master classes is basically if you have $10,000, you can make a movie. Now, I will say, none of these directors, Rodriguez, Ed Burns, Werner Herzog, although I'm inspired by them and I've learned things from them and I respect them, none of them are necessarily a major influence on the style of how I want to make a movie, but they're a huge influence, again, on the attitude of and the spirit of making a micro budget movie. So that's why I highly recommend them. They are why I decided, yes, we can do this. I've got connections, I have friends. We can make this happen. But also with that is with Robert Rodriguez, one of the things he talks about is it did not matter if anybody saw El Mariachi. If nothing else, he thought, I'll at least sell it to the Mexican home video market and just make my money back. And if you make something super cheap, it's a whole lot easier to make your money back. I'll just make it so I can just make my money back. And then I'll make the next one. It's just a stepping stone. It's not like the first one has to be a home run, ends up in Sundance and makes your career. He had no expectations of that happening. It did happen for him, but he had no expectations of that happening. And so when I was going into making Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse, again, I had no expectation that somehow this was going to be the film that launched my career and made me wildly successful and got me into Sundance. That didn't matter. It was all about just doing something and getting started. So many directors will spend years and years just trying to get enough money to make a short film, or they'll spend 10 years trying to get enough money to make their first low budget movie. Part of the reason is because before you've done anything, it's really hard for anybody to give you money when they haven't seen any proof that you might have some idea how to make a movie. That's why it's so important just to make something, because that will get you started. If nothing else, you will learn a lot. You might make something halfway decent. If all you end up with is just 10 minutes, one good scene, well, hey, you've got yourself a short film. If nothing else, you've got yourself a short scene. If all you have is one good scene, that's a start. Your first film will probably not be good. There are some pretty incredible directors who their first films were not good. Some of them you can see. Kubrick hates his first film. If you know anything about Quentin Tarantino, his first film, if it was ever actually finished, not good enough that Quentin Tarantino wants you to see it. And Terrence Malick's first film is not actually available for public viewing. It can only be viewed by students at, oh gosh, whatever it is, the Art Institute, Film Institute, whatever it is. I don't think Once Upon a Time in the Apocalypse is a masterpiece by any means. I am well aware that there are lots of mistakes. Well, actually, I don't even know if I would call some of these things mistakes, because it's not as if I didn't know it wasn't perfect. There are plenty of things in this movie that I know, oh boy, I really wish this was different. I really wish this was better, but I did not have the capabilities because of a lack of budget, whatever, limited resources and constraints. I am aware that there are things in there that could be better, but we're constrained by our resources. We're constrained by time. We're constrained by money. Now, that being said, there are many things that, knowing the constraints, I tried to do things in a way that would play into those constraints. Some people might think those are mistakes, but they're actually intentional. I did it that way on purpose. For example, the very fact that this movie is supposed to be reminiscent of a spaghetti western. Spaghetti westerns are low budget movies. Spaghetti westerns have lots of mistakes. Spaghetti westerns have lots of hokey things. For example, there's not a lot of blood, and when there is blood, it's really fake looking. That's on purpose. Anyhow, that's an example, but I'm getting off topic. There's a whole lot of things that I'm going to talk about in future videos having to do with the screenwriting process, having to do with the pre-production process, having to do with the production process of making the film. And like I said, I will break down certain scenes and talk about the decisions to do certain things one way versus another way, with the constraints we had, why we did it a certain way. Talking about how to actually make a micro budget movie, for example. One of those constraints being time. You have to work quickly on a set. Now, I would say one of the biggest mistakes I made is not doing a lot more time before we were shooting to work together with the team, to plan things out together as a team, so that I could make more people feel involved as much as they wanted to be involved in the creating of the scene beforehand. You don't have a lot of time to do that on set when you're shooting, and so we should have done more of that beforehand. Anyhow, those are some of the things I'm going to talk about in future videos. So I would encourage you, if you are a person who wants to make movies, make a movie. And one of the biggest reasons why I'd say make a feature film is because, especially when it comes to storytelling, which I would say is the hardest thing about filmmaking, the technical stuff is not necessarily that hard. Or another way to put it is, you can make mistakes, or things don't have to be perfect with the technical stuff if you have a good story. Telling a story visually in the structure of a film is difficult, and it's unlike anything else. And unless you do it, you're not going to really know how to do it. It takes practice. Most people aren't going to hit it out of the park the first time. So practice. And in order to practice, you just got to do it. Anybody can make a film. The hardest part is being committed, staying committed, and finishing the thing. Because it's going to be that post-production, actually sticking to it, following through. When everybody else, or most everybody else, has done the fun part of like being on set and shooting that stuff, actually following through and getting it done, that is the hardest part. And that just takes determination. Okay. Anyhow, that's enough for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.